Hey, do you want to become a better sniper in Fortnite? Because I have 5 tips for you to be a fucking beast. Look, I'll admit I'm not the most amazing player at Fortnite, but one thing I can do is snipe. So without further ado, let's get into these 5 tips. Tip number 1 is to get the enemy in the center of your screen before you scope in. I feel like this isn't talked about enough, and if you were to take away anything from this video, personally I think it's one of the biggest things that has helped me become better at sniping. As you can see in these clips here, I get the enemy in the center of my screen, and then by doing that 90% of the time when I scope in, they're going to be directly in the crosshairs. Then if you need to, you can make fine adjustments from there. This is much better than if you had an enemy on the left hand side of your screen, you know, aiming in and then having to drag the scope all the way across the screen. You know, this is going to be slow, they're going to be able to move around, and really, majority of the time that doesn't work. So if you were to take anything away from this video, honestly that is probably one of my biggest tips, is to get used to getting the enemy at the center of your screen, and then as you scope in, most of the time they're going to be directly in the crosshairs and you can just shoot straight away. Tip number 2 is learning how to track your enemies and judge bullet drop. This is probably one of the most difficult things about becoming good at sniping. As you probably know, when you're sniping from a distance, when you shoot, the further the bullet travels, it's going to start dropping in the air. So we've got to account for this as players. A little tip I have for this one, and a good thing you can do to start with, is if a player is, you know, a bit of a distance away, you can just aim, you know, a little bit above their head, and what's going to happen there is either you're going to hit the headshot, which is, you know, ideally what we want, or, you know, you'll probably hit their body if it's a little bit further away than you thought and the bullet drops a bit more than you thought. So tracking a player is another really important skill, as you'll see in this clip that I'm about to show. So as you can see, I get the player in my scopes, but he's sprinting away, so I have to adjust for this, and I'm tracking him until I feel confident with the distance I am away from his body, and then I take the shot. Now this is a really important skill, because majority of the time players aren't going to be just standing still, and the hard thing is when you're sniping from a distance, if you're having to track the player and adjust for bullet drop, you know, there's a lot going on at the same time. So this is really an important skill that you'll have to learn. Tip number 3 I have for you is you got to aim for the head. So especially when you get better at sniping, you're going to want to start aiming for the head majority of the time, because as we know, hitting someone in the head with a sniper is an automatic kill, and really that's what we want. This sort of has to do with the last point about bullet drop, but you'll have to account for the different distances that you're at and aim, you know, more and more above the head. You know, I think this is really important once you start learning and becoming a bit more comfortable with the sniper, is, you know, always aiming for that headshot. Tip number 4 is a bit of a weird one, but it is just take more shots. So, you know, this might sound a bit obvious, you know what, take more shots, yeah, obviously, but seriously, if you give up after one shot, you know, you're not going to learn that way. So really, just take as many shots as you can. As someone whose name I do not remember once said, you miss all the shots you don't take. And yes, I know that sounds really freaking cheesy, but it is true, and it does really prove my point. So, you know, you're not going to get that kill if you don't take the shot. So what are you doing? Just take more shots. You know, and coming back to the point about the bullet drop, you know, if you've got someone at a distance, it is really handy if you're taking lots of shots, because, you know, you're going to get used to that bullet drop at that sort of distance. Hopefully you're going to get the kill. Especially if you have cover, like there's no reason you shouldn't be taking lots of shots. Like, so there's 2 reasons for this. So reason number 1 is obviously, you know, you want to get the kill, and hopefully you're going to get the kill. But reason number 2 is the more shots you're going to take, a lot of the time the enemy is going to start freaking out, they're going to make mistakes, and you're going to get an opportunity for, you know, a nice, easy, clean shot. So yes, it sounds sort of self-explanatory, but just take more shots, you know, which is going to lead into tip number 5, which is really seems super obvious, but I think sometimes it needs to be said. And tip number 5 is just to practice. So yeah, like that is super obvious, but I think it is really overlooked. Like, I think a lot of people really want to be good at sniping, but then they'll play a game and they'll rarely pick up a sniper. So it's like, you can't expect to be good if you're not practicing with the sniper. You know, it's just like anything in life. The more you practice, the better you're going to get. And it might help you to go in a creative map and verse bots and snipe bots. If that's something that you think will help you, that's a great idea. You know, but then there really is nothing like the real world practice in a game. But you know, especially if you see someone at a distance, unless they have a sniper themselves, you're pretty safe to, you know, be firing off a few shots and having a good practice, and again getting used to that bullet drop, you know, trying to track enemies with the scope. So really a big tip is just to practice. It's super obvious, but it's really handy. So just a bit of a recap. We have getting your enemy in the center of your screen before you scope in, which again I think is one of the biggest tips I want you to learn is, yeah, get the enemy in the center of your screen before you scope in, because then you're not going to have to muck around too much with wasting time trying to adjust to get them in your crosshairs. Then tip number 2, we've got tracking and bullet drop, which is probably the hardest skill to learn, and it will take time, but again super important, because you know, there's no getting away from it. At distances, the bullet is going to drop, so you need to learn how the bullet behaves at certain distances. Tip number 3 was, you know, aiming for the head, and this is more of a tip for once you get better at the game. Like at the start, you know, you might want to just aim for the body because there's a, you know, a bigger hitbox with the body, but when you get better, you want to start aiming for the head a lot, because then you're going to get more kills and you're not going to be mucking around too much. Tip number 4 was take more shots. You know, again, pretty self-explanatory, but just don't give up. You know, you're going to get used to how the snipers behave and things like that, so you just want to take as many shots as you can. And then, you know, the tip number 5, really obvious, but just practice. You know, if you really enjoy sniping, like, it's going to be a breeze to just practice. You know, you're going to get better the more you play, so just practice. Alright guys, that's my 5 tips for being better at sniping. I hope you can take something away from this video. If this video helped you and these tips helped you, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Any other video ideas that you have, or anything else revolved around sniping. I am actually half decent at it, so I'll make a video. And if you want to see any more from me, please like and subscribe. See ya. Oh! Nice. Oh my god. That was nice.